Welcome back. Now we're still reading from the doctor's point of view as we get to chapter 18 in Treasure Island. The name of this is called Narrative Continued by the Doctor, End of the First Day's Fighting. Okay, which implies there's going to be fighting, so the action continues. In the last two chapters, we've had them leave the Hispaniola, the boat that they sailed in, the ship. The Hispaniola is a schooner, is the type of ship. And there are 7 of them, 5 that were in the boat and 2 back at the stockade. And they sunk the boat, not because it got hit by a cannon, but because it was being, they were avoiding being hit by a cannon. And they lost a lot of their stuff in the sinking of it, and only have 2 working guns at the moment. All right, so that's where we left them. Let's see what happens next. And they're on their way to the stockade, okay, because they think that they can defend themselves. Even just being a few of them, they can defend themselves if they have a good defensible position in the stockade. Here we go. Chapter 18. Make sure your text is handy. Make sure your notes are handy so that you can take notes along the way if you have to, okay? We made our best speed across the strip of wood that now divided us from the stockade, and at every step we took, the voices of the buccaneers rang nearer. Soon we could hear their footfalls as they ran and the cracking of the branches as they breasted across a bit of thicket. I began to see we should have a brush for it in earnest and looked to my priming, and that means he's getting his gun ready, okay? Captain, said I, Trelawney is the dead shot. Give him your gun. His own is useless. They exchanged guns, and Trelawney, silent and cool as he had been since the beginning of the bustle, hung a moment on his heel to see that all was fit for service. At the same time, observing Gray to be unarmed, I handed him my cutlass. It did all our hearts good to see him spit in his hand, knit his brows, and make the blade sing through the air. It was plain from every line of his body that our new hand was worth his salt. Okay? So Abraham Gray, once again, was the guy who joined them at the last minute. The doctor sees he has no weapon, so he hands him his cutlass. And Gray's all like, yeah, got it. Ready to go. And they're like, cool. Good. He's on our side and he knows how to use a cutlass. Okay, cutlass again is a curved sword with a kind of a one-sided blade, kind of a chopping kind of sword. Often seen in pictures of pirates. As what they want to know about Treasure Island is a lot of the stereotypes about pirates came from Treasure Island. Yes, Robert Louis Stevenson used some stereotypes of the day in his writing, but his writing inspired other people to write about pirates, and that's how a lot of these things like cutlasses and having one leg and having a parrot, things like that became kind of standard pirate stuff because Robert Louis Stevenson wrote about it. All right, 40 paces farther, we came to the edge of the wood and saw the stockade in front of us. We struck the enclosure about the middle of the south side, and almost at the same time, 7 mutineers, Job Anderson, the bosun, at their head, appeared in full cry at the southwestern corner. They paused as if taken aback, and before they recovered, not only the squire and I, but Hunter and Joyce from the blockhouse had time to fire. The 4 shots came in rather a scattering volley, but they did the business. One of the enemy actually fell, and the rest, without hesitation, turned and plunged into the trees. After reloading, we walked down the outside of the palisade to see the fallen enemy. He was stone dead, shot through the heart. We began to rejoice over our good success when just at that moment a pistol cracked in the bush. A ball whistled close past my ear, and poor Tom Redruth stumbled and fell his length on the ground. Both the squire and I returned the shot, but as we had nothing to aim at, it is probable we only wasted powder. Then we reloaded and turned our attention to poor Tom. The captain and Gray were already examining him, and I saw with half an eye that all was over. I believe the readiness of our return volley had scattered the mutineers once more, for we were suffered without further molestation to get the poor old gamekeeper hoisted over the stockade and carried, groaning and bleeding, into the log house. Okay, so to recap, they get to the stockade, or they're trying to get to the stockade, and the guys at the blockhouse, Hunter and Joyce, were there to fire too, and so basically kind of have a little gunfight with the enemy, and they shoot one, and the rest run off, and they're kind of celebrating, outside the fence, and they check the guy, because they check the guy that they shot and he's dead, and they're kind of like, woo, we did it. And as they're doing that, another shot rings out from out of the bushes from the pirates, and it hits Tom Redruth and kills him, or is about to kill him. It looks, because the doctor says he can see with half an eye that all was over. He's like, oh, he's a gunner, and he's a doctor, so I guess he can say that, right? And let's remember who Tom Redruth is. He was the guy that got left behind with Jim when the squire went to go buy the ship in Bristol, and he's the one who like accompanied him to go back to the Admiral Benbow. Kind of a grumpy dude, didn't really want to go on the trip, and now he's been shot and looks pretty bad. Okay. Poor old fellow. He had not uttered one word of surprise, complaint, fear, or even acquiescence from the very beginning of our troubles till now, when we had laid him down in the log house to die. He had lain like a Trojan behind his mattress in the gallery. He had followed every order silently, doggedly, and well. He was the oldest of our party by a score of years, and now, sullen, old, serviceable servant, it was he that was to die. The squire dropped down beside him on his knees and kissed his hand, crying like a child. "Be I going, doctor?" he asked. "Tom, my man," said I, "you're going home." "I wish I'd had a lick at them with the gun first," he replied. "Tom," said the squire, "say you forgive me, won't you?" "Would that be respectful like from me to you, squire?" was the answer. "Howsoever, so be it, amen." After a little while of silence, he said he thought somebody might read a prayer. "It's the custom, sir," he added apologetically, and not long after, without another word, he passed away. Now, let's remember that the squire wanted to bring him because he really liked him. He was somebody he was really close to, an older man who'd probably been a mentor and a kind of a caretaker for the squire when he was young. And he dies, and the squire's like, "Can you forgive me? Can you forgive me for doing this to you?" He's like, "I guess. Somebody want to read a prayer for me?" And he dies. It's very sad. In the meantime, the captain, whom I had observed to be wonderfully swollen about the chest and pockets, okay, had turned out a great many various stores. So the captain had a bunch of stuff shoved in his clothes, right? The British colors, and by that they mean flag, a Bible, a coil of stoutish rope, pen, ink, the logbook, and pounds of tobacco. He had found a longish fir tree lying felled and trimmed in the enclosure, and with the help of Hunter, he had set it up at the corner of the log house, where the trunks crossed and made an angle. Then, climbing on the roof, he had with his own hand bent and run up the colors. He puts up the flag. He makes a flagpole out of a fallen tree, hoists it up, and puts the flag on it. This seemed mightily to relieve him. He re-entered the log house and set about counting up the stores as if nothing else existed. But he had an eye on Tom's passage for all that, and as soon as all was over, he came forward with another flag and reverently spread it on the body. "Don't you take on, sir," he said, shaking the squire's hand. "All's well with him. No fear for a hen that's been shot down in his duty to the captain and owner. It mayn't be good divinity, but it's a fact." Then he pulled me aside. "Dr. Livesey," he said, "in how many weeks do you and the squire expect the consort?" Now, the consort is the boat that was set up to come look for them if they didn't return in a certain amount of time. I told him it was a question of not weeks, but of months, that if we were not back by the end of August, Blandley was to send to find us, but neither sooner nor later. "You can calculate for yourself," I said. "Why, yes," returned the captain, scratching his head, "and making a large allowance, sir, for all the gifts of Providence," just kind of luck, right? "I should say that we were pretty close hauled." "How do you mean?" I asked. "It's a pity, sir, we lost that second load. That's what I mean," replied the captain. "As for powder and shot, we'll do. But the rations are short, very short. So short, Dr. Livesey, that we're perhaps as well without that extra mouth." And he pointed to the dead body under the flag. So what he means by that is we don't really have enough food. If it's going to be that long before somebody comes to get us, we're close hauled, he says. And the term close hauled means, okay, if it's a shipping term, that means that you're in bad state. Like you need to stay close. You need to prepare your ship because you're up against a storm. Okay. So he's saying it's a metaphor for the kind of trouble they're in. We're in a bad way right now. We don't have very good chances right now. And it might even not be a terrible thing that one person already died, because that means that maybe more of us might survive. And that's a really grim way of looking at things. Just then, with a roar and a whistle, a round shot passed high above the roof of the log house and plumped far beyond us in the wood. Remember, the round shot's cannon, right? Cannon fire. "Oh ho," said the captain, "blaze away. You've little enough powder already, my lads." So he's like yelling at the pirates, "Go ahead, shoot at us. You don't have enough powder to keep this up." At the second trial, the aim was better and the ball descended inside the stockade. So remember my picture of the stockade? Okay. So the stockade would be, this is the blockhouse, and the stockade is whatever's inside the palisade, or this fence of logs. Okay. So plunk, cannonballs start landing inside it. So a little bit close, right? At the second trial, scattering a cloud of sand, but doing no further damage. So they just have a cannonball hit near them and sand comes up. "Captain," said the squire, "the house is quite invisible from the ship. It must be the flag they are aiming at. Would it not be wiser to take it in?" Take down the flag so they don't aim at it, right? "Strike my colors?" cried the captain. "No, sir, not I." And as soon as he said the words, I think we all agreed with him. For it was not only a piece of stout, seamanly good feeling, it was a good policy besides, and showed our enemies that we despised their cannonade. So keep firing cannons at us. We don't care. All through the evening, they kept thundering away. Ball after ball flew over or fell short or kicked up the sand in the enclosure. But they had to fire so high that the shot fell dead and buried itself in the soft sand. We had no ricochet to fear, and though one popped in through the roof of the log house and out again through the floor, we soon got used to that sort of horseplay and minded it no more than cricket. Cricket is a game played in Britain, kind of like baseball. It was like, interesting game happening. We're just not bothered right now. Okay. "There is one good thing about all this," observed the captain. "The wood in front of us is likely clear. The ebb has made a good while. Our stores should be uncovered. Volunteers to go and bring in pork." Gray and Hunter were the first to come forward. Well armed, they stole out of the stockade, but it proved a useless mission. The mutineers were bolder than we fancied, or they put more trust in Israel's gunnery. For 4 or 5 of them were busy carrying off our stores and wading out with them to one of the gigs that lay close by, pulling an oar or so to hold her steady against the current. Silver was in the stern sheets in command, and every man of them was now provided with a musket from some secret magazine of their own. Okay, so Hunter and Abraham Gray went back to see if the sunken boat was still there with stuff. And when they got there, they saw that pirates were taking the stuff that was left and they were putting it in one of the other boats. And in that boat was Long John Silver. And all of the pirates had muskets. Those muskets weren't from the Hispaniola. They weren't from the stores of guns and ammunition that they thought they had. This was extra. And so somebody had secretly brought some on board the ship. Okay, so that didn't work out so well. The captain sat down to his log, and here is the beginning of his entry, and that's like a journal. Okay. Alexander Smollett, master. David Livesey, ship's doctor. Abraham Gray, carpenter's mate. John Trelawney, owner. John Hunter and Richard Joyce, owner's servants, landsmen, being all that is left faithful of the ship's company, with stores for 10 days at short rations, came ashore this day and flew British colors on the log house in Treasure Island. Thomas Redruth, owner's servant, landsman, shot by the mutineers. James Hawkins, cabin boy. And at that time, I was wondering over poor Jim Hawkins' fate. A hail on the land side. Somebody's hailing us, said Hunter, who was on guard. Doctor, Squire, Captain, hello, Hunter, is that you? Came the cries, and I ran to the door in time to see Jim Hawkins, safe and sound, come climbing over the stockade. We knew he was coming, right? So the captain is making his journal and saying, here are the people that survived, and we don't have a lot of rations. Here we are. We came ashore at Treasure Island. He basically is writing this so that if somebody finds it, they know what happened to them, because he doesn't think they're going to make it. They're in a really tough spot. And now Jim has joined them. Okay, remember where Jim was last? Okay, write down a bit about what happened in this. It isn't as action-packed as the others, but there is a death, and that's important. Tom Redruth has died. And so now we're down to, instead of the 7 guys, now there's a 6 that are there. You know, Jim makes 7. Jim isn't a grown man, so they often don't include him in like their count of who against whom, like the good guys versus the bad guys, and then there's kid, good guys, bad guys. But it turns out Jim is a pretty worthy guy to have on your side. And I think you're already seeing that a little bit. And we're going to continue to see that as we go. Make sure that you write down unfamiliar vocabulary, especially words that I didn't explain, because you don't want to just learn the words I tell you. You want to learn the words that you search out on your own too. And sometimes those are going to be the ones that you remember the most. Okay. Fill out your notes. Get back to me with any questions. And I'll see you again when we go to the next chapter. I'm just going to scroll down and take a look at what that one is. It's The Narrative Resumed by Jim Hawkins, The Garrison in the Stockade. So I will see you soon for chapter 19. Goodbye for now.